What's up, guys? D-Rock1992 here. For this next video, it's a little late. This video is going to be a little late, but I am going to go over all of the notable films that came out in the month of January of this year. So, January is often known as the toilet bowl of the movie season. There's a lot of bad films that come out. A lot of studios put movies that they don't think are going to do very well in the month of January, so they can just be in January to be crappy, basically. So, needless to say, last year, January of 2016, was not a good month at all. There was only one major film that had a high percentage on Rotten Tomatoes, that had a positive reception on Rotten Tomatoes. With this month, I only counted one movie also that had a passing grade on Rotten Tomatoes. So without further ado, I'm going to get right into it. The first film on my list, the weekend of January 6th, the first major wide release movie that came out in 2017, January of 2017, was Underworld Blood Wars. So Underworld, as a lot of movie fans know, is a big series. This Underworld film is the 6th film, I believe, in the series. It's the 5th, actually. The fifth movie in the franchise. Kate Beckinsale stars as a vampire named Celine, a vampire hunter, something like that. Anyway, these movies have their fans. These movies have their fans, but they're normally critically derided. Thus far, on a budget of $35 million, it's made $78.7 million. So that's a pretty good total for a movie that has definitely does have a fan base. But critically, the movie got only a 17% on Rotten Tomatoes. Pretty much all the movies, I believe, have had rotten reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. So they're not critic-friendly at all. These movies are not critic-friendly. Cinema score, this is the score that audiences give. Audiences gave the film a B+. So, not bad at all. Like I said, this Underworld franchise has the fans. They have fans, for sure. I haven't seen any of the Underworld movies, but maybe someday. And they're going to get another film. They're going to get the 6th film in the series coming up. So, Underworld fans, be excited. You have another movie coming out eventually. So, next weekend I'm going to talk about is January 13th. The first movie I'm going to talk about is an animated movie called Monster Trucks. Monster Trucks is about... Monster Trucks is probably about what you'd expect. A movie about monster trucks. So, I don't know much about the film itself. I do know that the main star of the movie is an actor named Lucas Till, and some supporting actors are Rob Lowe, Danny Glover. So there's some names with this attached to this movie. It also is a big time box office bomb. It had a $125 million budget, and it only made $60.4 million. That is a major bomb. So, and the reception was not good, 33% on Rotten Tomatoes. However, audiences who did see this film gave the film an average grade of A with CinemaScore. So, the people who did see it, they really liked it. But not a lot of people liked it. Not a lot of people went to see it. And critics didn't like it either. The majority of critics didn't like it. So, Monster Trucks, for all intents purposes, was a dud. Next movie I'm going to talk about is a horror film called The Bye-Bye Man. It has a recognizable, relatively recognizable name. If you're a fan of the films The Matrix, Carrie Ann Moss is a recognizable name. She played a supporting character in those films. And this Bye-Bye Man movie, on a $7.4 million budget, made $24.6 million. One of those horror films that was made on a small budget, but was able to make some money out of it. It made almost 4 times its budget back. So you have to consider that a success. Critically, though, it only received a 22% on Rotten Tomatoes. And fans who went to see this movie only gave the film a C. So that's not great. So even the fans found fault with the movie itself. Next movie I'm going to talk about is an action thriller called Sleepless. Sleepless stars Jamie Foxx and the rapper T.I. Michelle Monaghan co-stars, Dermot Mulroney co-stars, Gabrielle Union also co-stars. This movie is a box office bomb as well. On a $30 million budget, it only made $23.5 million. Not good at all. And Jamie Foxx is a fine actor. I've seen some movies of his before, and he's a good actor. Just not a good movie that he was in. The film received a rating of 19% on Rotten Tomatoes. The audiences who did see this movie, though, did give the movie a B+. So that's definitely good. The next movie I'm going to talk about, let's see here. Oh. Next film I'm going to talk about is a film that was directed, actually this is the weekend of January 20th, and there are 2 films in particular that I want to talk about here. And the first one is the movie Split, directed by M. Night Shyamalan, who, M. Night Shyamalan, if you know a lot about his movies, really started off big with The Sixth Sense, a classic horror thriller type film, and it's regarded as his best work. And then he made a couple other decent films, but then he started to make really bad films. The Happening comes to mind, Airbender, the Avatar, the Last Airbender movie, which was just not good, according to a lot of critics. After Earth. So the guy's had a lot of misses, more misses than hits. This movie's about a guy, Split's about a guy who has so many different multiple personalities. He has multiple personality disorder. He kidnaps 3 girls, and they have to try to escape from him, try to put the personalities against each other. It's a psychological thriller film. James McAvoy stars as the guy who has multiple personality disorder. There's another film in M. Night Shyamalan's filmography that is connected with this film, and that's the movie Unbreakable. And the reason why they're connected is because Bruce Willis, who stars as the main character in Unbreakable, cameos in this movie. He's in the movie. So, but yeah, those two movies are definitely, they're connected. The movie itself received a 75% on Rotten Tomatoes. So, and I believe that is the only positive movie on Rotten Tomatoes that I'm going to be talking about here. The only one. And a lot of people are saying that this is a film that is making M. Night Shyamalan not a bad name again. You know, he came out with another movie a couple of years ago. I forget what it was, but it's a Hansel and Gretel type film. That movie got pretty solid reviews. This movie, pretty solid reviews as well. And, you know, as a result, M. Night Shyamalan isn't a joke anymore. He's not the punchline to a joke or anything like that. He's back. And this movie was bonkers successful. Compared to the budget, it had a budget of just $9 million. It's made $194.4 million. That is incredible for such a small movie. Incredible budget. So, one of the biggest financial successes off the budget of this year so far. So, Split, definitely. You know, I've never seen an M. Night Shyamalan movie. I might see that someday, you know? I may see that. Next movie I'm going to talk about is another sequel, Triple X Return of Xander Cage. Little bit of background with the Triple X movies. The first Triple X movie came out in 2002, and it starred Vin Diesel as Xander Cage. I watched part of that movie. I haven't seen the entire thing. I thought it was decent from what I did watch. But I have seen Triple X State of the Union, which Vin Diesel did not return to reprise his role in that movie. Ice Cube actually portrayed the Triple X in that movie. And I like Triple X State of the Union. I thought it was a good movie. A good action movie. So anyway, Vin Diesel in this movie returns to the Triple X role. Samuel L. Jackson is also in it. Sam Jackson has been in the first... He was in the first Triple X, and he was in the second Triple X as well. And he's in this third one. Budget... This movie's been a success so far. On an $85 million budget, it made $308.1 million. So it was successful. It's been very successful. So, very good. Success. Critically, it received a 44% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is, it's mixed. It's kind of more mixed reviews, toward the mixed reviews category. But yeah, this movie was a big financial success, and they're going to possibly make a fourth film as well because of the success of this one. So, absolutely, this movie got an average grade of A- on CinemaScore also, by the way. The score for Split for CinemaScore was a B+. So a lot of fans like that film too. And I've heard that Split has a big twist, a really good twist, just like The Sixth Sense does. The Sixth Sense is known for that. Is known for a big twist at the end. At the end of the movie, which I don't know because I haven't seen the film, but it's definitely been known for a big twist. Anyway, January 27th, the weekend of January 27th, there were two major releases that came out during that week that I'm going to talk about. First one is a family film, A Dog's Purpose. A Dog's Purpose is about a dog a personality inside of a dog that keeps coming back as different dogs, basically, as a different dog and all that. He keeps coming back, and that's kind of what the story is. Josh Gad voices the different dogs, the different voices of the dogs. Also, Britt Robertson is in the movie. She, a couple of years ago, was in the movie Tomorrowland, which was a financial success. Got her kind of noticed as a big name. Dennis Quaid, a veteran actor, is in the film as well. A Dog's Purpose actually has some controversy attached to it. There was a video that actually was on TMZ. There was a German Shepherd named Hercules, which there was a guy who dragged and dipped this Hercules into rushing water, and then this Hercules dog was visibly resisting. So it very much pointed out, there was a lot of question about animal abuse in this movie. You know how in a lot of different movies with animals, they'll have a message that says no animals were harmed during the making of this movie. Well, there's a lot of question about this Hercules being abused as an animal in this movie, during the production of this movie. So there are a lot of questions there. It's just PETA called for a boycott of the film, I see. So it's like, there you go. When PETA gets involved, there's something bad. So, I mean, just not good for the publicity of the movie. And, however, despite the controversy, the movie was financially successful. On a $22 million budget, it made $66.5 million. But critically, it only received a 34% on Rotten Tomatoes. Also, the fans that did see this movie gave the film an A. So there were different fans that ignored the criticism, ignored the animal abuse allegations, and they still went to go see this movie. And it showed, because it did make a lot of money. It made almost 3 times its budget. So, it definitely was successful, but critically it was not successful. And then the final movie that I'm going to talk about for 2017 is the Resident Evil, the final chapter. Resident Evil, like Underworld, is a big action horror film franchise. There have been 6 movies in this series. It is Emilia Jovovich has been the actress that has been in the film. She's the main star. She plays a woman named Alice. So Resident Evil, the final chapter, definitely was it came out the weekend of January 27th, and so in the U.S. it came out in January. So this is the final adaptation of Resident Evil. So they're going to retire the franchise, probably, and retire the character. So Milla Jovovich doesn't have any more Resident Evil movies to be in. So, overall, this movie was a financial success. On a $40 million budget, it made $147.3 million. But critically, it did not receive good reviews. It received only a 33% on Rotten Tomatoes. CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of B, so the people who did see this movie really liked it. These movies, the Underworld movies and the Resident Evil movies, they're just not for everybody. But there's a certain fan base that goes out and sees these movies, and it shows because they make money. There are the people in those fan bases that go out to see these movies, and because of those people, these movies have been successful. So there you go, you know. Definitely been successful. I'm gonna do something new for the movies of January. I kind of forgot to do this before, but I'm gonna do it now. I'm gonna read the consensus off to you guys. The consensus for Rotten Tomatoes. What Rotten Tomatoes said about the film. So first off, with Underworld Blood Wars, the rating of, like I mentioned, was 17% on Rotten Tomatoes. The site's critical consensus reads, Underworld Blood Wars delivers another round of the stylized violence that the series is known for, but, like many fifth franchise installments, offers precious little of interest to the unconverted. So, very telling response by the critics with this one. The movie Monster Trucks. Like I mentioned, it only received a 33% on Rotten Tomatoes. The site's critical consensus reads, despite flashes of inspiration, the singularly high-concept Monster Trucks shows that it takes more than monsters and trucks to create a compelling feature film. Next up, The Bye-Bye Man. The Bye-Bye Man, as I mentioned, received a critical response of 22% on Rotten Tomatoes. Rotten Tomatoes says about this movie, The Bye-Bye Man clumsily mashes together elements from better horror films, adding up to a derivative effort as short on originality as it is on narrative coherency or satisfying scares. So, when you have a 22% on Rotten Tomatoes, you're going to get a consensus like that, definitely. As of this moment, I don't think Sleepless has one. It doesn't say anything on the Wikipedia page that it doesn't have a consensus for Rotten Tomatoes for that movie. But the next film on the list is Split, the only movie of 2016, the only one I talked about that had a positive showing on Rotten Tomatoes. As I mentioned, a 75% on Rotten Tomatoes. Rotten Tomatoes says, Split serves as a dramatic tour de force for James McAvoy in multiple roles, and finds writer-director M. Night Shyamalan returning resoundingly to thrilling form. Next up is Triple X Return of Xander Cage. Now, as I mentioned with this film, it received a 44% on Rotten Tomatoes. Rotten Tomatoes says, Triple X Return of Xander Cage should satisfy fans of the first two installments, but its preponderance of set pieces can't quite make up for a tired storyline that fails to take the franchise, or action fans, anywhere new. And then finally, the last two movies here, A Dog's Purpose, which I mentioned. It received a 34% on Rotten Tomatoes. The critical consensus reads, A Dog's Purpose offers an awkward blend of sugary sentiment and canine suffering that tugs at animal-loving audiences' heartstrings with shameless abandon. And then the final consensus I'm going to read is Resident Evil, the final chapter, the 6th version of the Resident Evil franchise. This movie received a 33% on Rotten Tomatoes, and the consensus reads, Resident Evil, the final chapter, may prove mind-numbingly chaotic for the unconverted, but for fans of the venerable franchise, it offers a fittingly kinetic conclusion to its violent post-apocalyptic saga. So, these critical consensus readings, they do give an overall message about what critics thought of the movie, about what Rotten Tomatoes itself thought of the movies that they're reviewing, that their critics are reviewing. So you definitely get a clear picture of how Rotten Tomatoes thinks of all these films. Now, there's a lot of people that disagree with Rotten Tomatoes, with what they're doing with critic reviews. Like, for example, a lot of people do not like the Rotten Tomatoes criticizing the DC movies, the DC extended universe. Man of Steel got very mixed reviews, but Batman v Superman and Suicide Squad both got very negative reviews. And there were a lot of people out there that criticize these negative reviews. I don't like them because I like the movies. They were both very good movies, Batman v Superman and Suicide Squad. But Rotten Tomatoes has its system. It does what it feels is necessary to do, you know? Excuse me. So, a lot of people are going to disagree with Rotten Tomatoes, but they do what they have to do. But anyway, that is it for the movies of January, the notable films that came out in January last month. Stay tuned. I'm going to be talking next about the movies of February. Already, February looks like a better month. So, that is it for this video. D-Rock 1992 out.